Love GAA history? Then you love going deeper with Over the Bar's Cordia Club membership. For just €5 a month, you'll get exclusive member-only episodes and series, early ad-free access to the main podcast, plus detailed show notes, a newsletter, and the chance to have your questions answered. Join Michael Foley and Ciaran O'Hara as they uncover the stories, the legends, and the questions that shaped our games. Don't just listen, be part of the club. Join now at overthebar.club.
Since the dawn of the GAA in 1884, the telling of its stories have been just as important as the sports. Through the years, heroes and matches have been immortalised, inspiring generation after generation. But some of its most important stories have also gotten lost or turned into legend. And in this series, we will explore some of the GAA's most fascinating forgotten tales, separating rumour from reality and myth from the truth that is often more amazing than the fiction. I'm Michael Foley.
And I'm Ciaran O'Hara.
So join us for Over the Bar, exploring the histories of the GAA.
Hello everybody and welcome again to Over the Bar, the Gaelic Games History Podcast. I'm Ciaran O'Hara, and once again I am joined by Michael Foley, who looks as if he's just climbed out of another rabbit hole.
Yes, but Ciaran, I'm kind of feeling like, this episode is almost kind of like a bit of karma. It's just kind of like adding some balance to this series because, like in the last couple of months, 2 episodes in particular jump out to me are our series on Offaly in 94, for that All-Ireland final that we mentioned in that series, and also Wexford 96. Which are 2 fine stories to tell, of course.
And
however,
you're referring to the Limerick bashing that occurred on those episodes.
I am. However, there was, one common fall guy in both of those, and it was hard on them. And I remember I got a message from one former Limerick player. I think it was the Offaly one, because that came out around Christmas time, and he was like, "Oh, thanks a million, Happy Christmas." Welcome back. Why do you have to talk about this again? So, in that spirit, Ciaran, we are going to do some Limerick loving. We're gonna give them some love. We're going to tell one of their greatest stories.
Okay, so I'm going to start very simply with our question. What was Limerick's most important All-Ireland win?
Well, in my opinion, Limerick's most important All-Ireland win is the 1973 All-Ireland hurling title that they won. They beat Kilkenny. And the reason I think it's the most important, it's because it's like an island in the middle of this huge, long, barren run of nothing. Like, if you think about it, it was their first All-Ireland title in 33 years in 73. So you're going back to 1940. Let's just say they did not win in 73. Well, then you're looking at nothing all the way to 2018 when John Kiley's team, got the first of 5 and 6 years. So while that Limerick team, the one that we're enjoying right now, is the greatest Limerick team of all time, I think the 73 All-Ireland is actually more important than any of the other ones they won because it did bridge the gaps. It was a rallying point, even though it created pressure, as time goes on and everybody's talking about, the team of 73. Well, in the same way, the team of 73 had the team of 1940 to have to listen to about, so it was really, really, really important for Limerick hurling as a traditional power. I mean, how can you be a traditional power if you're not, winning All Irelands and things like that? So without 1973, Limerick's status, I suppose, in the game would have been much, much diminished. And who knows what would have happened to Limerick hurling if you hadn't have had, they got 5 managers off that team, plus a selector in Liam O'Donoghue. So you had Eamon Cregan, you had Phil and Richie Bennis, you had Tom Ryan, who managed them in 94 and 96, and you get Joe McKenna as well, who managed Limerick. So, do you get that kind of influence? Like, do you get JP McManus, who was 22 years of age in 1973 and absolutely besotted with hurling and besotted with the fact that his friends from South Liberties were such crucial characters on that team in the late 60s, early 70s. Do you get that, interest there? Do you, there's so many what ifs if the All-Ireland of 73 isn't secured. So yeah, that's the story we're going to tell today.
Okay, so I'll give it some context, and I'll just point our listeners to this week's Corja Club exclusive as well, because it's somewhat related in that we are telling the story of the great Laurie Maher. His greatest era, or his great era, was juxtaposed to Limerick's prior great era, the 30s and the early 40s. So where are we how does this result in 73 come about? Where does it start? Because it's, as you say, it's a long time between drinks.
It's a long time between drinks. If you're thinking about Limerick, in that era, you probably have to go back, as in many of these stories. I mean, this is a story of players taking ownership of a situation. This is a story of a strike. It's the story of a team operating under enormous pressure, both internal and external, to get a job done, getting the thing done, and how they did it. So in many ways, this opportunity could have passed them by. I mean, it was on a knife edge in many, many ways. So we're talking about a team of serious resilience as well. And where that resilience comes from, like, you have to look back. Where were Limerick, as you say, in this era? Well, we'd say at the start of the 60s, they were very much a bit part team in Munster. So their last Munster title was in 1955, before 1973. So they won it in 1955. But after that, really, they don't map for about at least another decade. Because what do we have happening? Well, we have, the Cork team of Ring is there in the 50s. Then you've got the great Tipperary team of the 60s. You've got a great Waterford team. And Limerick just don't really register. They just can't get there. There's, they were disorganized. There was huge player turnover. It was just a very, very poor setup. But again, in so many of these stories, when you've got this great wave, where did the great wave of players come from? Well, as always, they come from your underage setup. So, you had Limerick CBS, for example, in the mid-60s, won 4 Harty Cups in a row, 4 Munster senior colleges, 64 to 67.
That would be Sexton Street.
Yes, correct. So,
you've got your nursery. Is very important in the development of Limerick hurling in the era.
Enormous. So you've got that little bit of a nursery going on. In terms of the minor team, like, they won a Munster minor hurling title in 63 against Tip, lost an All-Ireland final to Wexford, and they won another one in 65 and lost to Dublin in the All-Ireland minor final. So they're generating players. One of the most important players of the era, of course, is Eamon Cregan. Now, Cregan had been hurling at under 12 level for Limerick. I didn't realise such a thing existed, to be honest with you. But he hurled under 12.
I just looked at your notes there and thought that was a misprint. I was like, Cregan under 21, under 12.
Under 12s in the 1950s, yeah. So he did a 3-year stint as a minor from 61 to 63. So by the mid-60s, by 66, players are starting to emerge. Now, Ciaran, we did a Corja episode for our members a while back on Hell's Kitchen, the great Tipperary full backline, and went to great lengths to kind of explain how frugal that group was and why they were such a great full backline. And you might also remember that the day they broke was in the Munster Championship in 1966 against Limerick, when Eamon Cregan scored 3-5. So he was there that day. Eamon Grimes was there. Bernie Hartigan was there. Phil Bennis actually was hurling at senior level by then as well, but he was injured on this particular day. As a matter of fact, Eamon Grimes made his debut around that time while he was doing his leaving cert. So these guys are young. They don't have, like, Eamon Cregan came from a storied Limerick hurling family. His father would have hurled in the 30s, and they've been reared obviously on the deeds of Mackey and that generation. But by and large, they're not entirely, if they are tainted by the mediocrities that have gone before them, it's in a kind of way of, it's almost kind of a learning thing. So, for example, Bernie Hartigan remembered from 1962 that Limerick actually only got together to train 2 weeks before the Munster Championship. 2 weeks. Like, they'd never trained during the league. There was usually 9 or 10 players at training, and like the food such as existed was like a stale sandwich and a glass of milk. Like, Eamon Cregan himself recalled before a game against Waterford in 1965, he remembered turning up, there was 4 players at training. So in every way you can imagine, the energy, the kind of the urgency has fallen out of this thing in a big way. But these players are coming and they're obviously very talented. And we're in an era where coaching is starting to change, and player expectations are starting to change a little bit. And in that way, the Limerick players are part of that. They're going, well, how can we do things differently here? I mean, for example, could we start training a little earlier than 2 weeks before the first round of the championship? It's a wild idea. What about winter training? Anybody think maybe we do a little bit of that? Late 1960s, they actually meet the county board. A group of players meet the board and say, can we start training over the winter so we'll be ready come the league and then indeed come the championship? And the county board are, as county boards tend to be, a little bit sceptical about this idea of doing something different. But then again, you look at the record from the previous decade and they go, listen, let's just do it, So in 1969, a man that we've come across before in the podcast, Ciaran, Joe McGrath from County Down, who's now at this point based. Yeah, what a great man. What a great man.
Who gave his name to the McGrath Cup.
Exactly. Based in Claughaun at this point, just outside Limerick City. He was a general manager with a company called Molex, who are still going strong. They make electrical connectors, fibre optic systems, all that kind of stuff. So he was working for them in Limerick at the time. But he was also fascinated with coaching. He was involved in the coaching courses in Gormanston College, which were like a little sort of like a proving ground for new coaches, like a kind of a university of innovation in terms of Gaelic games coaching.
For coaches.
Like Frongach for coaches, only they could leave at the end of every evening. They weren't imprisoned in any way, shape or form. So McGrath was key in the development of the Gormanston courses. So he was coming with that sort of knowledge, that sort of interest in kind of revolutionizing things. And he was a very, very positive person, very progressive. So in a way, he was kind of like, for a crowd like the Limerick County Board, he was maybe not the kind of person you would have thought they went for. But I guess they're responding to a need here.
He's the Paul Kinnerk of his era.
That is absolutely correct. That's exactly what he is. And he has that impact on Limerick. From the beginning, he is investing his own money, but also the county board's money in things that Limerick never had before. So he will randomly go and buy gear, slitters, boots, hurleys for the lads, and send the bills where they need to go. He puts lights up in the Gaelic grounds so they can train during the winter. And the training itself is very modern, very, very progressive. And that obviously causes friction with the county board because now he's costing money. Oh, by the way, it's worth mentioning, and this came up in our episode on how Cork finally brought Kerry down in the 80s. You'll recall that Billy Morgan was originally brought in not as a manager, but just as a coach. He had no say in the selection of the team. Well, Joe McGrath had the same deal going on. He could coach the team, but the selectors were the guys. And as we will see, the Limerick selectors of this era were a fairly active bunch. They liked a good switch, or switcheroo, Ciaran, for that matter.
There's anarchy.
There's complete anarchy. Mick Dunn, then of the Press and later RTE, asked Joe McGrath very early in his time, what are your ambitions for Limerick? And Joe McGrath said, to win everything within 5 years. And how close he got, Ciaran, as we'll find out in a second. By the way, something else started to happen. Meals, the stale sandwiches were gone. And who provided the money for it? Well, a young J.P. McManus and another man, Declan Moylan, apparently were involved in the fundraising so that the lads could have proper meals.
It must have been a very young J.P. McManus.
He was 22 years of age in 1973. I think he might have been the youngest club chairman Limerick ever saw. He was chairman of South Liberties. So he was already around the scene at that. And as I say, a lot of his contemporaries, the likes of the Hartigans, the Grimes brothers, they were playing for South Liberties and obviously playing for Limerick as well. So, there was always that connection. And of course, his love for hurling, that's well known. But the impact of all these changes was almost immediate. So, they start doing winter training in 1969. They reached the 1970 league final straight away. In against Cork, get absolutely hockeyed, 2-17 to 7 points. But they're kind of up, and I won't say they're up and running, but they're up and trudging. they're up and doing laps. So they're getting it into their legs now. They're getting the mileage into their legs for what's going to come next. 71, everything goes up a notch. They win the league, Ciaran. Limerick win the league title, and they win the Oireachtas final, which is one of the competitions that Joe McGrath had earmarked. So what's that on the old bingo card? League title, tick. Oireachtas final, tick. They make the Munster final in 1971 as well against Tipperary. And they were 8 points up early in the second half. And I mentioned just a moment ago the tendency for the Limerick Selection Committee to get a bit skittish on the line, shall we say. Well, in this case, they're 8 points up. Tips start to come back. And rather than going, okay, we've played well up to this point, maybe a substitution, maybe something like that, or do we just keep it steady? No.
This is a very famous match because this is the match that involves the dry ball. Now, there may be some listeners for whom you will have to explain that.
Yes. So, the dry ball incident. First of all, it's pouring rain. The game was in Killarney and it was absolutely pouring rain. Tipperary get a free at a crucial moment late in the game. And the ball goes in behind the goal and, of course, it's sodden wet. And Donny Nealon is part of the Tipperary management at this point. And Babs Keating is taking the free. And Donny throws in a dry ball to Babs, which he places and proceeds to smack into the net. It's a crucial score, and Tipperary, of course, go on to win. But the controversy is, well, dry ball, what happened to the other ball? And so, and all this. To be honest with you, I've always struggled to see the controversy in this. Wet ball goes out, other ball gets thrown in to keep the game going. I don't see the issue, only that if the ball doesn't fly into the net, no one says a word, but it does. And Tipperary go on.
There wasn't a rule that defined that you must continue to use the same ball. It has been routine for certain teams I could mention to use a particular type of schlitter and to keep a bag of them by the goals.
Yes, you can. I'm going to stop you there now. You can keep your conspiracy theories to yourself, mister. I have a half an idea who you're talking about there, and it's perfectly fine. It may just be that the slitters being made in that part of the world are just superior to the other slitters that are coming from elsewhere. That's all I'll say on that matter, Ciaran. However,
schlitters made out of Cork are clearly not as reliable.
Yeah. Right. Anyway, back to the skittish Limerick Selection Committee. So, Tipperary are making their comeback. The Limerick management just lose their minds. By the end of the game, there isn't a one single player left, apart from the goalkeeper, in the position that they started. They have completely and utterly upturned the team, and by effect, and not taking that away from Tipperary, but Limerick have upturned the game on themselves, really. So this is devastating, absolutely devastating. They were so close because they had won the league title by beating Tip with a last second point. So they knew they weren't far off of Tipperary. 1972, we drive on. They get to another league final against Cork. They lose only by a goal this time. So they got absolutely hammered. 16-point beaten in 1970. They only lose by a goal this time. But again, the Limerick Selection Committee's reaction is a little bit over the top. There's only 5 players left in the same positions for their first Munster Championship game shortly after against Clare, which in itself kind of gives, it's maybe, if you think about it in the context of where they've come from, it's now 1972, we're heading into 73. This is maybe the last vestige of kind of, I'm going to say incompetence, really, that kind of surrounds this group. So, first of all, there's a toss for home advantage, which Limerick agree to, even though in the minds of the players in particular, going to Ennis if they lose the toss is very, very dangerous. Like Ennis, no more than now, is a hard place to go and play in 1972. But they toss for home venue. Clare win it, so they're off to Ennis. Next thing, the players are late getting there. They're all in, it's not team buses and all the rest of it. They're arriving in their own cars. They get caught in traffic. They're all late getting there, which is really not acceptable. And many, many years later, Henry Martin wrote a book some years ago called Unlimited Heartbreak about Limerick, which, to look at it now, given the prosperity they've had over the last decade, it's amazing to look back and see how the hunger had just, eaten them to the core when this book came out. But there's a piece in it, obviously, about this era, and one of the selectors from the time, Dennis Barrett, says that they actually treated this game against Clare, first round of the Munster Championship, kind of a bit like an experiment. They were trying stuff, in their selection, and they didn't get a chance to try anything else because Clare beat them, and Limerick are gone. First round out. Good luck. And everybody is incensed and looking for scapegoats and wondering who they're going to hang out to dry next.
Love GAA history? Then you love going deeper with Over the Bar's Cordia Club membership. For just €5 a month, you'll get exclusive member-only episodes and series, early ad-free access to the main podcast, plus detailed show notes, a newsletter, and the chance to have your questions answered. Join Michael Foley and Ciaran O'Hara as they uncover the stories, the legends, and the questions that shaped our games. Don't just listen, be part of the club. Join now at overthebar.club.
Joe McGrath gets out ahead of all of this and does an interview with the Limerick leader shortly afterwards, where he asks for exactly the things you would expect a guy like him to ask for. As I said before, he's just a coach. He doesn't have any say in the selection of the team. So he asks for what he calls, quote, a greater streamlining of authority. The farcical situation and system that allows for a conclave of selectors to be needed is outdated and should be gotten rid of. Now, Ciaran, it's 1972. Limerick have just been knocked out of the Munster Championship. Their trainer is basically saying the selection committee system is a farce. What do you think the county board are going to do here?
I'm just going to assume that the conclave in question also sit in conclave at county board meetings, and that he may have run out of feet to shoot himself in.
When it comes to politicking, this was not Joe McGrath's finest hour. And yes, you're right. It's nothing more than a good conclave these selectors enjoy. So a month later, Joe McGrath receives a letter informing him that his services are no longer required by Limerick. Now, this sparks more outrage because the players, some of the players actually wanted to get rid of McGrath, but there was a big rump that did not, because they had obviously improved very quickly when working with him. And, they were getting very close. Now, the 72 results against Clare obviously is a terrible kick in the guts, but they're getting close to something. And losing their trainer now seems just like the county board. Again, you talk about shooting yourself in the foot. Well, it's like the county board shooting themselves in the foot again, because they've come from a situation of incredible mediocrity to a situation where, at whatever about the selection committee, at least they're fit and they're hurling well, and there's good players here to be working with. So what are we doing? So when it comes in to the new year and there's still no movement in terms of bringing Joe McGrath back, the players, some of the players at least, decide that it's time for action. So they write another letter complaining about McGrath not being there. And there is a decision made by 5 of them to withdraw their services. Now, the 5 were Jim Hogan, the goalkeeper, who had been goalkeeper for a couple of decades for Limerick at this stage. Bernie and Pat Hartigan, Eamon and Joe Grimes also withdraw. Now, these are significant because they're all South Liberties players, first of all. And South Liberties had won the Limerick County title for the first time in 81 years in 1972. So they had the honour of the captaincy, which was Eamon Grimes. So what we're seeing here is the captain leading a walkout of 5 key players.
And any other prospective captain, for that matter.
Well, absolutely, yeah. I mean, who are you going to give it to now? All the South Liberties lads are gone. So the pressure is on as well. I mean, I think when you look back now, the removal of Joe McGrath obviously is an issue, but also I think the pressure is on the players. Like they've a lot of them have spoken since about they were so tired of hearing about Mick Mackey. In fact, one of them said Mick Mackey was tired of hearing about Mick Mackey and the All-Irelands that were won back in the 30s and in 1940 and bridging the gap and so on. So maybe there was a bit of that in it too. There was a bit of kind of fatigue and this kind of frustration that no matter what they did, there was always going to be something getting in their way. That's the other thing I notice when looking at this team. There's a kind of a frisson of tension all the time, whether it's between players or just around the whole. It's the tension you get when a team is trying to win an All-Ireland who haven't won one in a long time.
No wonder Eamon Cregan was the perfect fit for Offaly.
He was born into it, Ciaran. Born into this sort of tension and sort of this very, very fine line. I get the sense with Limerick, there was a very fine line you had to tread. And with that in mind, let me say that again. And with that in mind, Jackie O'Connell, who had been an administrator with Limerick for years, and he actually won an All-Ireland medal in 1934, was the one who brought them all back together. Bernie Hartigan had actually gone off and went playing football for Limerick for a bit. But he brought everyone together and said, look, we just got to push on. At this stage, Eamon Cregan's brother Mick had been installed as Joe McGrath's replacement, by the way. I should have mentioned that earlier. And Mick Cregan was perfectly qualified for the role, by the way. Qualified PT trainer with the Army. So he had, no problem there. So the players effectively, they missed one game. On February the 11th, Limerick played Tipperary in a league match and the lads made their way up into the stand and sat there. A month later, they played Cork and they were all back. Apart from Jim Hogan was on the squad, but he was probably the one that lost the most because, as I say, he had been goalkeeper for years and years and years, but he never got back in the team in 73. He played in the All-Ireland semi-final against London, of which more and on. But he effectively didn't regain his place for the Munster Championship or the All-Ireland final. As I say, some of the players didn't want McGrath to stay. And in fact, some of the players saw the strike and the withdrawal of these players as the moment that the 73 All-Ireland was won. Tom Ryan in particular has said that the day those boys went to the stand and actually saw that the other players could manage without them because they drew with Tipperary, took a last-minute free from Len Gaynor to draw the game. Once they saw that Limerick could manage without them, well, it's not our choice whether you come back or not, or it's not on us to do anything. It's on you now to make a decision. So Limerick were moving on without these guys. So they obviously made the decision. There's something here. We're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I would imagine, given the kind of person Joe McGrath was, he may well have said, go back. Discretion being the better part of valour here. Go back. Mick Cregan will do a job and it hopefully will all be fine. So whatever way it worked out, they were back by St. Patrick's Day and they're back training. And I tell you what, Ciaran, Mick Cregan is fairly sticking it to them below in the Gaelic grounds.
Okay, how does that differ from Joe McGrath then? How does Mick Cregan differ from Joe McGrath?
You've seen the movie Full Metal Jacket, I presume.
Private Pile.
So the guy in that, I mean, is a slightly souped up version of Mick Cregan. Slightly. The training is way harder. Cregan was tough. He said his own description of his training style was boot and bollock with a bit of carrot and stick. And I get the sense that the emphasis was on the boot and bollock and the stick rather than the carrot. So they were, of course, you got to remember they were preparing for 80-minute matches in this era. So, they did need a fairly serious bank of fitness. And under Joe McGrath, okay, the lights are up in the Gaelic grounds, but, lads would still tell stories of, ducking into the shadows and popping back out again a lap or two later or whatever the case may be. With Cregan, there was no hiding place, absolutely none whatsoever. His brother Eamon has described the training sessions since as just penal. Like he said, he described it one day in a piece. There was a warm-up. There was 6 laps, first of all, done to time. So they had to be 55 seconds a lap. That's, I presume, a lap being the Gaelic grounds, lap of the pitch. So 6 of those. Then they would play a match for 60 to 90 minutes, and then the physical training would start. So 10 press-ups, 8 tuck jumps, 6 squats, and 80-yard sprints done 10 times. So it's intense. Like, it's really hard training. But the fact that they've managed to get winter training installed with Joe McGrath, like, in a way, they wouldn't have won the All-Ireland without Joe McGrath, but equally they probably wouldn't have won the All-Ireland without Mick Cregan absolutely bringing them to a point of fitness that was possibly above and beyond what anybody else was doing.
Joe McGrath opened the door and Mick Cregan dragged them through it.
Dragged them through it, exactly. And stood at the door to make sure that everybody went through. Because if you didn't, the door was getting shut and you weren't coming in. So they push on through 1973 through the league, make another league final. You'll have noticed at this point now, Ciaran, they're making lots of finals. You know, they're not winning many of them, but they are making them. So they're a serious competitor, and they are in the conversation to win an All-Ireland before 73 at all. But they lose another league final. So they lose to Wexford this time, 4-13 to 3-7. Tony Doran goes mad, scores 2 goals and 2 points against Ned Ray. Now, people will be going, but sure, wasn't Pat Hartigan their all-star winning fullback of that era? Why wasn't Pat Hartigan a fullback? Well, because Pat Hartigan was among those who had walked out. They kept Ned Ray, our famous selection committee, kept Ned Ray at fullback, even though Ned Ray himself had said, I hate playing at fullback. Please put me to cornerback. They said, no. But the fact that you conceded 2-2 marking Tony Doran, we're not going to put you to cornerback. We're going to drop you now. So thank you and goodbye. Ned Ray was based in Dublin at the time. People might remember Ned Ray's pub. It's very, very near. It's very near Houston Station. It's a great spot for GA people for many, many years. But anyway, so he was up in Dublin. But yeah, so he was dropped. They also lost a key forward in Mick Graham, who broke his leg in 3 places in the league final. So coming into the championship, and they're playing Clare first up again, it's all very uncertain. And again, the selection committee completely upturned the team for the Munster Championship.
But I suppose the bright side is they didn't toss for venue.
No, not this time. No, not this time. But no one's quite sure how this is going to go. But they beat Clare 3-11 to 3-9. Joe McKenna, Ciaran, makes his debut for Limerick on this day. Joe McKenna, who was, of course, originally from Offaly and had been living in Limerick for a few years at this point, but had continued playing for Offaly. As a matter of fact, played hurling for Offaly in the 1973 National League and only moved over to Limerick just before the championship. So this is his first ever game for Limerick. He's against Clare in this game. So 3-11 to 3-9. To go back to the Ned Ray story, because Ned Ray becomes a very, very important character in the winning of this All-Ireland. So he's not on the squad at this point. But he returns to Limerick to visit someone in hospital. And when he's there, it just so happens that Rory Kiley, who's the Limerick County Board chairman, he's also in hospital because he's been, Ciaran, gored by a bull. Ouch.
Super ouch, as the young people would say.
Super ouch is right. And at the same evening, Jackie Power and John Whelan, who were 2 more of the notorious Limerick selection committee, were in visiting him. Jackie Power, by the way, whose son Ger will go on to great things with Kerry in a few more years' time. And the lads had been talking about target men full forwards, because that was no more than now, actually. Target man full forwards had become a bit of a thing in this era. And they were kind of wondering, can we find a target man full forward? Joe McKenna hadn't quite revealed himself in that role yet. And they said it to Kiley, and Kiley said, well, you're talking about Ned Ray. Ned Ray was up in the conversation. Ned Ray is here. Would you go and ask him? He's down visiting someone here. So they ended up meeting Ned Ray in the hospital and going, how about playing full forward? And Ray said, yeah, sure, I'll give it a go. There was a challenge match that evening against Waterford. So they said, go on into the challenge match. So he went in, he scored 2 goals and a point. Job done. There's your new full forward. Cornerback up to full forward. So could this be, for once, have the selection committee done something radical and got it right? I mean, I say this much for them. You cannot fault them for taking a gamble, these guys.
It does seem like they may have had just a little bit too much time on their hands.
They are really thinking a lot about this, all right. Anyway, Munster final time, Tipperary and Thurles, 1973. It's a classic Munster final day, Ciaran, you'll be glad to hear. cloudy, heavy, what do we call it? It's a very close day, humid, there's tension in the air, and we get an absolute epic game. Ned Ray is just a sensation at full forward. Eamon Cregan scores 2 goals. Tipperary are 6 points up early in the second half, and they look comfortable enough, like they're going to see it out, no more than Limerick did in 71. But Limerick are coming back. They score 6 goals, Ciaran. 6 goals, I tell you. And it all comes down to a controversial 65. So it's actually the last puck of the game. So the ball goes down. The first controversy is whether it's a 65 at all. Some people who are close to the event say the Tipperary goalkeeper touched it after it went out over the end line. Umpire signals 65. Goes out. Richie Bennis is taking the 65, I should say. He gets a few words from Babs Keaton as he's going by. The two lads never say what was said, so they've conveniently forgotten after all the years gone by, but something is said anyway. Richie said, it made no difference to me whatsoever. Puts the ball down and he hits it, and it goes very, very high. So high that it looks like it's gone over the post, maybe. And the umpires are looking up and they're going, and it's a white flag.
It's grand. It's Thurles. There's Hawkeye.
Yeah. Oh, man. Unfortunately, now we're about 35 years too soon for that. But they put that white flag. Crowd going crazy. Poor Len Gaynor goes a bit crazy as well, because he's absolutely incensed by the decision. He's convinced it's gone wide. And as he says in his own autobiography, only in the last few years, he actually gave the umpire a jab at the hurling in frustration at his decision. So it's the last puck of the game. Limerick have won 6-7 to 218. Now, if that's not a 1970s scoreline, 6-7 to 218, 80 minutes, it's great. And of course, they're delighted. So it's the first Munster title in 18 years. So whatever about, a long wait for an All-Ireland, 18 years for a Munster title. Like Tipperary waited 71 to 87. That's 16 years, and all this stuff about the famine is over and all that. Limerick have waited 18 years for this. So it's a huge, huge moment. And I'm not sure how this happens, but there's an All-Ireland semi-final. Now, as we know, All-Ireland semi-finals were few and far between in this era. Usually, if you won Leinster and Munster, you went straight into the final. But they played All-Ireland quarterfinals in this period. Galway and London played. And lo and behold, didn't London beat Galway this particular year? So the All-Ireland semi-final is actually set for the following Sunday. So they have no time to celebrate. Well, I say they have no time to celebrate. I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did. They probably thought, playing London, it's a done deal. It's a bit of a battle. It's only late on that they pull away. And again, 80 minutes, 115 to 7 points. You'd have to think London would be disappointed with 7 points in 80 minutes, wouldn't you?
Had they scored 7 by the 60th is all I'm thinking.
Oh, with that, I'd have to go back and check. That's an excellent question, and I should have checked. In fact, in fairness to London, they put up a very, very good show considering the nightmare that they had getting there. So the game is played in Ennis. They're delayed 8 hours the night before in London at the airport because of a baggage handler's strike. They don't arrive in Dublin until midnight. Presumably they stay in Dublin and go down the following morning to Ennis. So, they're travelling on the morning. It's a long spin. They get there and they give a fine account of themselves, 115 to 7 points. And it's only towards the end that Limerick pull away. Frank Canning, actually, there were 6 Galway players on that London team. Frank Canning was one of them. He would be a uncle of Ollie and Joe and all the Portumna crew there. So they're in the All-Ireland final, which is wonderful. It's fantastic. It's been a long time.
I should just ask, who did Ned Ray mark in that game?
So in that All-Ireland semi-final, Ned Ray marked his brother Jerry. Isn't that fantastic? Jerry Ray was full back for London. Ned was full forward for Limerick. There was actually very little about it. If that happened now, it would be the centerpiece of an All-Ireland semi-final or a big game. 2 brothers marking each other in different counties. It would be huge. But back then it was like, oh yeah, that's a nice thing. And there was no needle between the lads. They hurled the game as, fair and square. And Ned did very well and Jerry did fine and everyone was satisfied.
I'm sure Jerry would have realised there was an airport at Shannon as well. It's a wonder he didn't mention that to the London County Board. But, By the by.
Love GEA history? Then you love going deeper with Over the Bar's Cordia Club membership. For just €5 a month, you'll get exclusive member-only episodes and series, early ad-free access to the main podcast, plus detailed show notes, a newsletter, and the chance to have your questions answered. Join Michael Foley and Ciaran O'Hara as they uncover the stories, the legends, and the questions that shaped our games. Don't just listen, be part of the club. Join now at overthebar.club.
Limerick are in the All-Ireland final.
They are. And it's pandemonium. I mean, we've seen it, back around 2018 when they got there, the huge explosion. When Limerick go well, they're one of those counties that just bring amazing energy to it, a bit like Wexford. Just this huge support rises up. And it's the same in 73. John D. Hickey writes a piece. He goes down to visit the camp before the All-Ireland final, and he writes a piece a little bit like something from National Geographic, one of those reporters who goes deep into the African jungle and discovers a long lost tribe, and they're just fascinated with their ways and customs. And I'm keeping in mind John D. Hickey's from Thurles, but anyway, he's in Limerick City and he's amazed. He's traveling through the city, and he describes seeing children in vacant lots and pitches playing with hurleys, shortened pickaxe handles, sticks, and other, as he describes, nondescript implements. I think whatever we think about what they're doing, we can take it that there's kind of a bit of hurling fever after gripping the city.
I think so, or else he stumbled upon something he shouldn't have.
I'm glad you said that. So it's all going swimmingly for Limerick. It's very exciting. There's some lovely stuff. I mean, I mentioned Ned Ray again because I do think, there's something significant about Ned Ray's story all the way through this, going from, cornerback into a position where he didn't want to play, getting switched back out, getting dropped, and then switched to full forward. And now he goes to visit his grandfather the week before the final. He lives out in Glenroe, and his grandfather actually has a picture of the 1940 team over the mantelpiece. I mean, that'll give you an idea of the reverence that was afforded to this team. And Ned Ray points to the picture. He says, "You'll have a new picture there next week." So that's, the kind of vibe. It's very emotional. People are really building up to this thing. But there's a couple of issues in the team that need to be sorted out. Now, there's a letter that I noticed in the Limerick Leader about a week before the All-Ireland final week from a man, and I have to say his name because this is extraordinary. A man called John O'Sullivan from Clough-Jordan has written in to the Leader, and he's talking about the Limerick team selection and what they might do. They're playing Kilkenny in the final, by the way. And he suggests moving Eamon Cregan to centre-back. Now, Eamon Cregan, by this point in his career...
Hold on a minute. If it isn't bad enough that we've got all these tinkering selectors, now we've got letter writers picking where the players are going to go.
There are Ranieris all over the county. Tinkermen everywhere you look. And keep in mind that by now, Eamon Cregan has won 2 All-Stars at left corner forward. He's the top scorer this season so far. He has had, by his own admission, a quiet-ish season up to a point, but he's a forward and he's a brilliant forward, right? The issue for Limerick is that Jim O'Donnell, their regular centre-back, has been taken off in the league final and the Munster final. So there is some discussion around the centre-back position. And true enough, I don't know whether the selectors were reading the Limerick Leader. I'm guessing they were, because they're just those kind of guys, they'll come with an idea. I just had this idea. I just saw something. Let me try this. They move Cregan to centre-back for the All-Ireland final to deal with Pat Delaney, who would have been one of Kilkenny's major threats up front. So Cregan is there. Now, this obviously causes, I wouldn't say uproar, but fascination and kind of wow, kind of amazement, because Cregan has played centre-back before for his club. He played a county final there. So it's not an alien position to him. And Cregan himself, his primary emotion is kind of disappointment for Jim O'Donnell. But, once he's given the job, it's a job to do, and he'll play there, and that's fine. It's an All-Ireland final. So Joe McKenna,
who I mentioned earlier on, had actually gotten dropped after the Clare game. He comes back in now into attack with Cregan having moved back. So Joe McKenna's second appearance for Limerick is the 1973 All-Ireland final. There's uncertainty around Richie Bennis. So at this point, Bennis had an infant son called Dickie who was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. He was severely ill at this stage. He was in hospital. There was fears for his life, but he did stabilise. Now, Bennis travelled to Dublin with the number of the doctor in the hospital and was keeping in regular contact with the hospital to see how he was. There was a question mark. He didn't know whether to play or not. He didn't know whether he's in the right mindset to play. But the fact that his son, his situation is stabilised, he had kind of decided to play. And then a rumour just went like wildfire around the place that Dickie had passed away. And this kind of threw things into uncertainty again. But Richie Bennis decided to play. As a matter of fact, there was another teammate. He's not said who the teammate was, I don't think. But another teammate was quite nervous the night before. So Bennis said, I have the solution for that. 4 pints, he said, 2 for you, 2 for me. So the night before the game, he slips down to the bar, gets the 4 pints on a tray, comes back up and he's heading to his room when Mick Cregan is prowling around the place. And Richie steps into an alcove, into a dark alcove. I'm presuming the pints were Guinness because they couldn't see anything in the dark anyway. And Mick passes by, Richie continues on and he has his couple of pints to calm himself and he's good to go for Sunday. The feeling before the game, of course, is that everyone wants Limerick to win because it's been a long time. It's not been that long for Kilkenny. The other thing that's going on as well that's worth keeping in mind is that Kilkenny are a little bit, I'm going to say a little bit decimated, if that's such a thing can be. They've lost like 4 players, including Eddie Kerr. Eddie Kerr has done his collarbone. Eamon Morrissey has gone to Australia. Jim Tracy, one of their defenders, is injured. Kieran Purcell is struggling with an appendix problem. And Chunky O'Brien is limited by a head injury. So that's a lot to be dealing with. But howsoever, Limerick haven't won an All-Ireland in so long. There's no certainty that they're going to be able to capitalise on what looks like Kilkenny's weakness. The day itself, Ciaran, pours rain. Awful day, which might contribute to the fact that it was the smallest crowd for an All-Ireland final in 15 years. It was barely 58,000 at it, which, can you imagine now? We've seen it. Like when Limerick make All-Ireland finals, it's complete mayhem trying to get a ticket. You just cannot, So it's not what we would call a classic, but does that matter? Limerick get what is described for years later as a pushover try, as a goal. Mossy Barrett scores it. I'll put up the link in the show notes. It genuinely is a pushover. Like the ball lands, Noel Skehan is in the Kilkenny goal. He is just assaulted by most of the Limerick forward line. And like Micheál O'Hare has no idea who's after getting the last touch to get it over the line. But anyway, it gets over the line. Mossy Barrett gets the credit. And Limerick go on to win by 7 points, 121 to 114. It's a very, compared to the journey they've had, it's a very calm, comfortable, composed victory, especially in the second half. They're never under any serious pressure. So they win by 7. It's magnificent, of course, the outpouring you can imagine. It's just, it's all they ever dreamt of, Ciaran.
And how does Richie Bennis do, given that, we've had this false rumour the day before that his son has died? You can only imagine the kind of nervous energy he has expended in the days beforehand.
Absolutely. And he has clearly been a key player for Limerick for a few years now. And thankfully, he has exactly the kind of day you'd hope he would have. He scores 10 points, 8 frees. So hugely influential again. It's magic stuff. Like I'd say this much, you'd have to, for all that they did wrong, radical, whatever, the selectors got it right. Eamon Cregan is brilliant on Pat Delaney. Ned Ray transforms that forward line. So the 2 big things they do in 1973 are absolutely key to winning the All-Ireland. The celebrations are exactly as you'd expect, but only one person outside of the team gets into the dressing room, Ciaran.
I've heard this story, but you should tell it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have probably heard this story, but it is worth telling. We mentioned before that JP McManus is the 22-year-old chairman of South Liberties at this point. Well, in the aftermath of the All-Ireland final, he is in the corridor outside the dressing room. And as he's described it himself, one fella is underneath him, pushing him up through an open window. And Pat Hartigan and a couple of other South Liberties guys are on the other side inside the dressing room, pulling him in. So JP, not for the last time, is in an All-Ireland winning dressing room with his beloved Limerick. So and actually, as a postscript, it's worth mentioning because there has been, it's a long time back. It's over 50 years now. And when the old Limerick players get together, stuff gets forgotten. We're not so sure. So one of the points of discussion in some of their reunions has been, where was JP in all of this? Did he actually put the money up for our meals? What was he doing? And Bernie Hartigan has always told a story that he met JP before the All-Ireland final, and he told him that if Limerick did win that All-Ireland, he would be a very, very rich man.
So he must have placed that particular bet very early in the year to get those odds.
I'm thinking maybe between Clare and Tip. That's what I'm thinking. Maybe he saw something after the Clare game that maybe they can do something here. So the celebrations are brilliant, as you can imagine. They go to the Crofton Airport Hotel. I'm not sure what that was, but anyway, the Crofton Airport Hotel. It's Sodom and Gomorrah stuff. The following morning there are supporters draped everywhere, just sleeping in corridors, couches, wherever they can find a spot, probably up on top of the reception desk. And Mick Mackey is there, of course, holding court. Mick Mackey, by the way, Ciaran, as we've said before, who was tired himself of hearing about the 1940 All-Ireland final, but obviously not tired enough of hearing about the 1940 All-Ireland final that he didn't think that using a tie pin fashioned using his All-Ireland medal from 1940 wasn't worth wearing on the night. I just wonder, the mind boggles.
Hey, if you got it, flaunt it.
I wonder would he have worn it if they had lost. That's my wonder. But you know what, we haven't heard from Mick Mackey yet. In all the episodes we've done, we haven't heard Mick Mackey's voice ever in anything. And I think it's worth. There was a quote. He said they're a great team. They've been together since November 1969. They were beginning to play well this season, and it looks as though they hit their best form in the final. So Mick Mackey was delighted with himself. Ned Ray was delighted. He got his new picture and brought it out to his grandfather the following week, put it up on the mantelpiece, and his grandfather slept that night with the Liam McCarthy Cup beside his bedside locker, which is a lovely thing. Like, you kind of hear this stuff about the obsessive fans and the people who go to all sorts of lengths to get to a game or see a game or whatever it is. Well, it was the same back in 73 as well. It was a fantastic story. A publican in Clontarf, of all places, got a call from a bar in LA on the morning of the afternoon of the All-Ireland final. There was 400 Limerick people in the bar in LA ready to listen to the RTE radio commentary. Technical difficulties, Ciaran, they happen. The RTE feed went down. So obviously somebody in the bar must have known this pub in Clontarf would have the match on. So they rang and said, would you mind putting the receiver of the phone beside the television so we can all hear the commentary from Micheál O'Hare? So he said, okay, put the phone beside the TV, and that's how they heard the All-Ireland final. It cost them £90, which in modern money is 1,100 euros. That's how much the phone call cost, but small price to pay.
I hope those 400 drank a bit that day.
Well, they owed him 90 quid back, to be fair, so hopefully they did. So look, it's a great victory, and when you look at it, if you think a lot of these guys were in their 18, 19 in the mid 60s, you add on 7 or 8 years, they're 25, 26 kind of, so they're in a really good position now to push on and do something even greater than just win the one All-Ireland, you would hope. And they do make the 1974 All-Ireland final again against Kilkenny, but they lose this time, and there is definitely a sense of slackening, even though they have made the final. Mick Cregan, for example, had been sent overseas with the army, so he wasn't around till the springtime. to do the training that they had become used to. The team holiday didn't happen till the late spring of 1974, so everything was a bit of a rush. I get the impression that the training was crammed into that period, really, from late spring to the beginning of the Munster Championship. There was also some problems in the background. South Liberties, for example, they were thrown out of the Limerick Hurling Championship for failing to fulfil a fixture against Doon. They had asked for a refixture. It seems they had gotten the refixture, but then the game was fixed to be played, and South Liberties didn't turn up, so they were thrown out. And again, we've already seen the number of players they have on the Limerick team at the moment. So that's, it just brings a bad vibe. About a month before the All-Ireland final of 74 as well, there was a club game between Ballybrown and Patrick's Well. Now, Patrick's Well were leading fairly comfortably going into the closing stages, and Richie Bennis was, I'm going to say, as he said himself, he was swanning around a bit. He was marking Tom Ryan. And the one thing that anybody who saw Tom Ryan playing in that era or who played with him would say was that the one thing you didn't do around Tom Ryan was swan. Don't be tugging his tail. So anyway, turns out that the two lads have what we shall just call a bit of a spat during the game. They are both sent off. And the problem, of course, now is they have to be suspended, and we're running into an All-Ireland final. They both get 1 month, which expires on the Saturday night before the final. So you have that. You have talk of flatness in the squad. You have talk of factions. You have talks of laziness. Tom Ryan has talked about a meeting in the Shannon Arms Hotel where he maintains that some players are complaining that they were training too hard. So the edge that was there maybe for the years and indeed into 73 had been blunted by the winning of the All-Ireland, it would seem. Matt Ruth was playing for Limerick in 1974. He was on the All-Ireland team of 74. But when they don't win, he gets dropped. He goes to Kilkenny and actually subsequently wins All-Irelands with Kilkenny. So again, you're looking at are they making the very best use of their resources here? Bernie Hartigan, who was substituted actually in the 73 final, is also substituted in the 1974 final, doesn't play for Limerick again. And as we move through the decade now, there's another change of the guard. So Cork come through and they're going to win 3 All-Irelands in a row between 76 and 78. Limerick lose 2 Munster finals, 75-76. Clare come forward, the team of Ger Loughnane and others, Sean Stack and so on. And they beat Limerick 2 years in a row, 77-78. Now they get back to a Munster final in 79 and they make an All-Ireland final in 1980 where they're beaten by Galway. But so it's not that Limerick kind of fade and disappear as a force. They maintain, they continue, and they are a decent team into the early 80s, but they never quite build fully on the All-Ireland win of 73. So the result being that we don't have another All-Ireland title for Limerick until 2018, which I go back to my very original point. This is why 73 was so important. It was like a kind of an anchor. Like I said, it gave us a bunch of Limerick managers. It gave us a bunch of people who were influential in the system as the years went along that maybe they wouldn't have had if Limerick hadn't won the All-Ireland. Maybe they might have got so browned off that they just didn't get involved. And indeed, we see the same stuff being talked about in the 2010s. So Declan Hannon back in 2013 was, I would say he was complaining, but I mean, it was obviously an anniversary time. So he was saying that we're tired of hearing about 73. We've got to make our own mark. The exact same way that the guys of 73 spoke about 1940. So even if it was the indirect bequeathing of that kind of edge alone that eventually 5 years later gets Limerick over the line, and the lesson learned that this time they had built the structures and the foundations to actually build on their first All-Ireland and win plenty more since. That's a huge legacy from 73.
Well, Mick, that was a fascinating trawl back through. What I'm inclined to agree with you was a pivotal All-Ireland win for Limerick, because if the gap had been 75 or 80 years, it would sure be hard to sustain a tradition. So as an intermediary between two glorious eras, it's an incredibly important win for Limerick. So thanks for that. And thanks at home for listening, or in your cars or wherever you are. If you get a chance, if you can, if you find time to pull in that car, open the app there. You can give us a rating, a like, you can share. share in app, you can share in WhatsApp groups. Just get the word out there that these stories are there for you. A reminder too that our Corja Club this week is on the subject of a previous golden generation for Limerick, but it's more on the flip side. We're looking at how the great Laurie Maher earned his reputation. So do join us for that. In the meantime, we'll talk to you next time on Over the Bar, the Gaelic Games History Podcast. Slán.
Love GEA history? Then you love going deeper with Over the Bar's Corja Club membership. For just €5 a month, you'll get exclusive member-only episodes and series, early ad-free access to the main podcast, plus detailed show notes, a newsletter, and the chance to have your questions answered. Join Michael Foley and Ciaran O'Hara as they uncover the stories, the legends, and the questions that shaped our games. Don't just listen, be part of the club. Join now at overthebar.club.